Welcome to the Explainer. So, today we're going to break down a raw, unfiltered account of a 40-day journey. And this isn't about some magical overnight transformation. It's about the really messy, tough, but, ultimately profound process of what actually happens when you decide to change.
Okay, so let's just dive right in, because the story we're looking at today kicks off right here. This wasn't some New Year's resolution or a big public challenge. It was just a simple, almost stark decision to stop doing a thing and then just sit with whatever happened next.
And right off the bat, we're told that this whole journey is not what you might think. The experience is framed not as some test of discipline or strength, but as a biological process. It's about the body and the mind literally finding a new equilibrium.
And this, right here, this just perfectly sums up the big misunderstanding we often have. It wasn't about gritting your teeth and fighting your old self. No, the real journey was about navigating something called identity friction, that super uncomfortable, awkward feeling of, literally outgrowing the person you used to be.
All right, so let's get into the first phase of this journey. A messy, physical, and a lot of the time, a totally invisible battle. This is where the emotional arc really begins. And spoiler alert, it's not with a feeling of empowerment. It's with just total chaos. I mean, look at this. This gets right to the physical reality of what happens when a core regulator, in this case alcohol, is just yanked away. We're talking about jolting awake at 3 a.m. with this shot of adrenaline, feeling totally wired but also completely exhausted, and this persistent nagging sense that something is just fundamentally wrong. This wasn't in the mind, not yet. This was the body in a full-on revolt. And this is such a key insight into how temptation really works. The desire for just one didn't pop up during the absolute worst moments. No, it would creep in on a sunny afternoon or right after a moment of stress when things started to feel okay again. The real trap was that little lie your brain tells you, hey, you're almost normal again. You can handle it now. Okay, so once the initial physical shock starts to subside, a whole new, much more complex psychological phase begins. This is the messy middle, and it's this period defined by substitution, emotional whiplash, and this really corrosive layer of shame. See, the thing is, your body just hates a vacuum. When that primary coping mechanism was gone, the nervous system immediately started scrambling for a replacement, for anything to fill the void. This phase is called substitution hell, and it's such a critical part of the story. So the cravings just changed shape. Instead of alcohol, it became a desperate need for sugar, or endless cups of coffee, or just aimless scrolling on a screen. And realizing this wasn't some kind of personal failure, but just a biological search for regulation, that was the key to stopping that shame spiral of, what is wrong with me? Then there's this fascinating idea called pub gravity. The struggle wasn't always missing the drink itself. It was missing the social permission to just stop, to check out for a while, to be numb. And without that easy escape hatch, you're just left there, raw, unbuffered, and fully present with yourself, which a lot of the time was just unbearable. And that leads to something described as emotional whiplash. Without that buffer, all the feelings come rushing back, but at full volume. This isn't a sign you're unstable. It's just the simple, often shocking return of actual, unfiltered feeling. So after enduring the physical revolt and that whole messy psychological middle, a fundamental shift occurred. And this wasn't about trying harder or finding a new trick. It was a complete change in perspective. This timeline here is a fantastic map of that whole emotional arc. You can see it, right? The first 10 days were just chaos. The middle 20 were all about adaptation and substitution. But it's in those final 10 days that a new baseline starts to emerge, where the nervous system actually starts to find its own regulation again. The breakthrough? Well, it didn't come from more willpower. It came from finally asking the right question. It wasn't about, how do I fight this craving better? It was about understanding, wait a minute, what is this craving really pointing to? And boom, that realization changed the entire game. Once that clicked, the fight just softened. The goal was no longer to win sobriety every single day, which is exhausting. It became much simpler and honestly way more profound. Just learn how to outlast discomfort. So let's look at what all of this led to. We've seen the struggle, we've seen the breakthrough. So what was that final feeling of accomplishment? After these 40 days, what actually changed? The key takeaway here is that the transformation wasn't an act of force. It was an act of endurance. It was about staying put, staying with the discomfort, the boredom, the raw emotion, long enough for your body and mind to learn that they could handle it. To learn that safety didn't need to come from an external source.
And at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to. The journey was never really about the substance itself. It was about confronting the pattern of escaping your own internal experience. The real accomplishment wasn't abstinence, it was presence.
And this leads us to the final, really powerful metaphor that reframes the entire difficult experience. It positions the struggle not as a problem you have to solve, but as a process you have to trust. And the whole thing concludes with this really resonant thought. That period of chaos and discomfort, the wilderness, it isn't a punishment to be escaped as fast as you can. It's a necessary and effective process of recalibration. And if you can just stay with it, it will eventually do its work.